in the perks you can equip 3-round burst. By looks and by, well, performance, you've now essentially made an M16. The thing about it though is this doesn't change the damage, which means that you're not going to get a lot of one burst kills. The rate of fire doesn't change at all. It's the same rate of fire inside the burst, but now you have delay between bursts, so your overall time to kill and effective range and all of that have gone downhill. The M16 is kind of a miserable weapon to use, and I wouldn't recommend doing it, except you can kind of go off the recipe here and add one other attachment, which is the 458 SOCOM rounds, and that will actually make it a 3-shot kill at any range, and it feels much more like an M16 should. Technically, this is for a different variant of the weapon, which I'm not going to consider its own unique thing. There was actually a Reddit post about this and everything else. It popped up today while I was editing this episode, so I'm going to link that down there below. Sort of a guns expert that lists every possible new weapon and configuration that you can have in the game. It's interesting how that got on the front page as I was editing my episodes, so now everybody's going to be like, you're stealing from Redditors, but that's okay, they hate me there anyway. Anyway, the new M4A1 with the 458 SOCOM rounds will deal 48 damage to 41, and it'll always 2-tap to the head or 3 to the body. It is a really, really high damage weapon, and what this means is that you'll get a lot of one burst kills, and it'll feel more like an M16. Your rate of fire will go downhill when you do this. It'll go from 800 to 600, but that isn't so bad because it can help tighten your burst a little bit. It doesn't kick up quite as violently. Handling attributes will be significantly worse if you kit your weapon this way. That's a real fact. I didn't even measure them because you're basically just making it the slowest weapon possible for that class, so it's not anything surprising to any of you. And the M16 is fun to use. I had a fun time using it. I felt like I was going back in time and playing a different game. It was really entertaining, but it wasn't really practical. This is another weapon that I would not recommend to most people. I have like a big section of weapons that I wouldn't recommend, and then I have some nicer ones at the end. Moving along, let's talk about the ever so popular AK-74U, which we haven't seen in a Call of Duty game, an Infinity Ward game, since the Modern Warfare series, the OG Modern Warfare series. Well, in this game, much like real life, you have to start with the base AK-47 and down convert it to the AK-74U. Doing that's pretty straightforward. You want to lower the caliber of the ammunition in the weapon down to the 545mm, which is it's a pretty high tier unlock. Then you have to use the 8.1-inch compact barrel, which is essentially no barrel at all, and no stock. I also put on sleight of hand and the stippled grip tape to give myself a little bit more recoil control, but that is effectively an AK-74U. You can do what you want with the other attachments. This changes the weapon very significantly. First of all, your damage is going to go down. The base AK-47 has a damage of 35 to 32 depending on your range. It actually doesn't go down that much in my experience, at least not on any of the gunfight matches where I can properly test the damage. And the AK-74U damage is almost halved in some circumstances. It goes from 22 down to 14, but you will notice that these also have the little asterisks because they do have a higher chest multiplier. The chest multiplier doesn't make much difference for the base AK because it's still always a 3-shot kill, but it can make a difference for your AK-74U. So if you're running the 74U variant and you shoot people belly button and up, there's a chance that it could be a 4-shot kill instead of what is effectively a 5-shot kill weapon now. The rate of fire does increase a little bit. That's 540 rounds per minute up to 666 rounds per minute, Satan's number, which theoretically helps your close range time to kill. However, adding these attachments cuts your range at least in half and increases your shots to kill by at least 1, if not more, in all areas. When I test out the base AK-47, I can 3-shot people all the way across this long strip on Grozno, which is longer than most of the distances you're going to engage anybody with this weapon. And then when I do the base AK-74U, I get the 4-shot kills at 32 meters, so that's at minimum half to the range, which in my opinion is quite rough. The handling isn't crazy better. You do get a better sprint out time. The base AK-47 has a sprint out time of 280 milliseconds. This one will go down to 200. And your aim down sights time gets about 100 milliseconds faster as well. So it is a snappier weapon and it does shoot a little bit faster. It's supposed to have less kick with the ammunition down conversion. Like with the ammo change, it will kick less. But when you do weirder things with other attachments like removing the stock and shortening the barrel a whole lot, that's going to increase your kick or recoil per shot. So in my opinion, the recoil isn't significantly better. What you've effectively done is just murdered your range and time to kill on this weapon for a little bit of gain in fire rate and maybe a little bit of gain in handling. In my opinion, it's best to put on all of these same attachments but keep the regular 7.62 ammo in your AK-74U, and that'll just perform better. I strongly dislike the AK-74U and don't recommend using it, well, to anybody. I just don't think it's a very good weapon. Maybe that's just me, because I'm 32 years old. I've been doing YouTube a long time. By most standards, I'm totally washed. I have no reaction time and no thumbs. And some days I just feel like a dinosaur. I feel like I don't belong, like I'm totally washed. And that's how the AK-74U makes me feel. So since I can't get good gameplay with this weapon, instead, I have to sell Astro headsets. I started YouTube in 2006, and I went full-time in 2009. That means I've been a professional YouTuber for over a decade now, and that's kind of awesome in a way, but scary considering that most content creators burn out after 4 years. You can only buy hamburgers to my poor doges, and they might get skinny again. At another AK-47 conversion that is on the exact opposite spectrum of everything, and that's creating the RPK. In order to create the RPK is very straightforward. All you have to do is add the 23-inch RPK barrel, then you add the LMG field stock and the 75-round magazine. The RPK, doing it this way, it's mostly the barrel is what changes things. It adds an incredible amount of range to your weapon. I mean, the range stat just goes bonkers. I have an episode coming up later on barrels and ballistics and stuff, but I do promise you the barrels do work. It's more than I could test for. You've got God tier range. It's almost always going to be a 3-shot monster no matter where you're aiming it. It does lower recoil significantly. It increases bullet velocity, and it basically triples your magazine size almost, so you have a whole lot of good things going on about the RPK. It's one of my favorite weapons to use in ground war. I don't have to worry about reloading. When I do reload, it's not even too bad. It mounts well, it aims well. However, the handling is a lot worse. Comparatively, we saw these numbers just before the dinosaur break. It almost doubles most of your basic handling stats. Both the sprint out and the aim down sights time were 500 milliseconds, which was just brutal. That's a whole half second before you can react or do anything when you kit a weapon this way. So it puts you out of commission really hard. You cannot rush with the RPK, you can't play aggressive with the RPK, but you can hold down positions like a god. The RPK is my favorite light machine gun so far in Modern Warfare. It's not quite as high damage and range and as performance as the others, but since you're upconverting an AK, it is effectively a slightly lighter light machine gun that is a little bit faster than the others, and I find that little bit of fastness to be easier to deal with, and I've overall had a fantastic time with RPK. I'd recommend it to anybody, especially in ground war. It's super good in ground war for holding down positions. Now, the last major weapon that we're going to talk about today is kind of a weird one because it's bugged. We're going to be talking about the AUG A3, or the Steyr AUG, because the one we have in the game is what's effectively the 9mm down conversion. It's the MPX of the real gun, which is a 5.56 rifle made by Steyr. And in this game, you can upconvert 5.56 to the real gun. In order to create the Steyr AUG out of the base AUG, you need to put the 5.56mm ammo attachment on it, which makes it into a rifle. You need to put the custom AUG A3 scope on it, which is one of the last scopes that you're going to unlock, and the longest barrel possible. Doing so creates the classic AUG that we all know and love. So the base AUG will deal 34 to 18 damage depending on where you hit, and the Steyr AUG, after we've changed it to 5.56, will deal 32 to, I'm not exactly sure how much damage, because the 5.56mm attachment is bugged. In general, it does less damage than the base version, but it does have a higher multiplier on some regions of the chest, so it can effectively deal more damage to the chest, but less damage to the head. And these multipliers also seem a little bit bugged and out of place. I would get headshots for shooting people in the stomach, and like it would count for limbs on shoulders, and it did a lot of really weird stuff. So I'm not sure what happened with the 5.56 conversion, what went wrong where, but it's definitely bugged, and I was having a hard time getting any consistent multipliers out of it, which is why I have the question marks, because I couldn't even do the long-range testing. I couldn't accurately hit the body enough to quite figure out what was going on at long ranges. So please keep in mind, if you use this weapon this way, it's bugged and it's not super reliable. It does lower your rate of fire as well from 740 rounds per minute down to 640. So you have lower damage and lower rate of fire. Ew, like why would you use this at all? Well, it almost quadruples your 3-shot kill range if you hit upper chest and up. That upper chest region deals more damage than the base AUG, even though everything else deals less if it counts right. So you can get super long 3-shot kills with the AUG. Like the base AUG, just the normal plain Jane AUG, has a 3-shot kill range of 11 meters. However, if you use the 5.56 one, it has a 3-shot kill range of 37 meters. The handling time is of course going to be a little bit worse than the base variant. Your base handling time is 350 milliseconds for sprint out. By the time you turn it into the proper full-length rifle, it goes up to 350. And your aim down sights time oddly didn't change for me. Maybe I'm drunk, maybe I measured that wrong, I'm not entirely sure. However, overall, I would not recommend kitting your weapon like this. Adding the 5.56 rounds to the AUG opens up a whole big unpredictable can of worms, and I just don't recommend it. I think it's going to make your weapon slower, I think it's going to make it less reliable, and I'm assuming I can do an update video at some point in the future and this will be fixed, because IW is just constantly fixing things. We've had pretty frequent patches from them, so hopefully this gets changed in the future. Next up today is a simple one. Adding snake shot ammo to the 357 Magnum turns it into the Executioner from Black Ops 2. It is a shotgun pistol, and I gotta let you guys know it's awesome. I have a lot of details about this weapon in the pistol episode, which was the last one, and then like 2 episodes back I have it in the shotgun episode. I think I'm mentioning this weapon in almost every episode because I think it's one of the most powerful sleeper weapons in the game that everybody is ignoring. It's easily the best pistol in Modern Warfare. There's nothing else that really competes with the snake shot, because pistols, they deal low damage, their hits aren't super reliable, you can't really use them as primary weapons, and what you're doing with the pistol in Modern Warfare most of the time is rapidly swapping to it and just spamming and praying and trying to get those shots to finish people off. Well, with this one you're shooting shotgun pellets that spreads, you don't even have to be that accurate, and they deal a ton of damage, more than some of the other shotguns in the game. So if you have a sniper rifle or a long-range weapon and you want to tactically hold a building, or for some reason when you're done tactically waiting in a dark corner in a building and you want to move around a little bit, you can pop this one out and you can move around close quarters very effectively with the snake shot. It does really, really good work. Lastly, I do want to say that it's possible to convert the M13 into something similar to the Ghost Honey Badger. In order to do so, you have to put on the Tempest Cyclone integrated suppressor, which makes your muzzle not available, the FPS close quarters stock, and most importantly the 300 blackout ammunition, which changes your bullet velocity, you trace rounds, enemy skulls, and quite a few things, and it makes it sort of an integrated, dedicated, suppressed weapon. Unfortunately, I don't have any gameplay of this one, guys. It kind of sucks today, but it takes forever to level these weapons up. It takes until the end of time and then some. So I worked really hard to get all of the other weapons at max level, but this one just I was not able to do. And finally, at the end, I didn't forget about this, the Star Wars Blaster. It isn't really a new weapon quite like the others, not a real one, but it is really funny looking, to be sure. All you have to do is take the Kilo 141, you put the 100 drum round mag on it, you put a sniper scope on it, you remove the stock, and you put the shortest barrel possible. Whatever attachments are left, you can do whatever you want. I like putting the whitest camo I have on it too, trying to make it all white. And it looks literally like a Star Wars blaster. This is almost more like a cosmetic variant and much less of an actual in-game stat changing thing like all of these other weapons. However, it is surprisingly viable. You can actually kill people pretty well with this weapon. Like, it's not the best weapon, no, but it's actually better than some of the other weapons like the AUG and the AK-74U that I've shown off today. It's better than the M16 to be sure. The gameplay you're seeing of this is me playing on PlayStation 4 against an entire full team of PC players. I am the only console player in this lobby. I was prepared to just get completely railed, but I managed to do okay, so it's kind of fun. If you guys want to have a fun gun, that's one I would recommend. And I did link the Reddit thread down below where the gun expert goes over a few more other, we'll say, variants of weapons. I wouldn't quite call all of them truly new guns. That is all for this episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. And if you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe, or buy an Astro controller. Drifter out.
Every year, Call of Duty finds a new way to pull people back into the fold and help them forget all of the bullshit that invariably gets crammed into this product. 2 years ago, it was an authentic World War II experience, conveniently timed against the reveal of Battlefield 5, which seemed to grate on many fans. After that, it was Battle Royale and a complete revision of the PvP sandbox. This year, it's all about gritty realism.
The invaders of my country have no regard for human life. We live like this every day.
COD Modern Warfare 2019 promised a return to the franchise's roots, not only in game design, but also in tone and presentation. The original Modern Warfare games felt pertinent and risky, presented to audiences at a time when America was engaged in wars in both Afghanistan and Iraq. Back then, the series felt willing to push into some famously uncomfortable territory. Subsequent Call of Duty games would wind this back further and further with future tech-inspired campaigns that provided little in the way of emotional resonance, or an emotionally schlocky World War II campaign that felt more like Saving Private Ryan than it did The Thin Red Line. Modern Warfare 2019, or Modern Warfare as I'll refer to it from here on, promised a gritty campaign that explored the atrocities of war and how they could impact civilian populations, while probing at the morality behind the justifications employed by both sides.
We want to present the different perspectives. We don't want to say that one of them is correct.
To be honest, I didn't believe any of the hype. I thought it would just be marketing bullshit, and we might...
Hey guys, LevelCat here, and today I want to try my best to answer one of the most commonly asked questions regarding Battlefield 5. Is this game worth getting now? By this time, most of you are probably aware that Battlefield 5 had one of the buggiest and most content-lacking launches in any Battlefield game's history. And I've wrestled with this question a lot over the past year because honestly, I didn't want people to feel like they were wasting their time and money on a game that wasn't fun or wasn't going to get better. For a diehard Battlefield fan, the answer was usually yes, it's worth getting, but for people who were looking for a Battlefield game that reminded them of the glory of past titles, it was a much more difficult question to answer. Especially for people looking for a good World War II game, the question got even more complicated. Well, the game has evolved a lot since launch, and it's definitely worth revisiting that question, especially now since DICE has released their Year 2 edition of the game with all the previous year's content unlocked. I've already seen the joke calling the Year 2 edition of Battlefield 5 what the game should have been at launch edition, which is a sick burn and all, but it's also not that far off the mark. With 18 months of development time on Battlefield 5, the title was a half-baked game in almost every sense when it first released. My initial review of the game characterized it as one of the best unfinished Battlefield games I had ever played, drawing parallels with its release in Battlefield 4 and just holding out hope that DICE would once again fix its bug-filled game. Well, I'd really like to say that DICE stepped it up over the first year and got the game back on track, but to be perfectly honest, things were pretty darn bleak for the entire first year of content. There were patches that introduced worse bugs than they fixed, they reintroduced bugs that were previously fixed, 3 to 4 patches in a row claimed to fix specific bugs, but they didn't actually get fixed. And then, of course, the insane content drought. Not only did Battlefield 5 launch with less maps than any other game in the past, but it also released maps at a slower rate than any other game in the past. So coupling the insanely buggy state with lack of content gave fans an entire year of underwhelming gameplay and content. However, DICE has finally begun to turn a corner. With the introduction of Operation Underground and now the Pacific DLC, DICE has released some of their best map content that the game has ever seen. In fact, the new maps are so good that going back to play the release maps is just a downright depressing juxtaposition. With the Community Games update coming sometime this chapter, fans will finally be able to create custom servers, which is desperately needed, if only for the sake of making server map rotations that skip all the crappy maps, which sadly is quite a few of them. For whatever reason, the map voting feature that Battlefield 1 got never made it into Battlefield 5. And so I'll often see entire servers clear out when Hamada or Fiel queues up in the playlist. Without question, Battlefield 5 is still not in a perfect state, even still. But it is getting better, and at its best, which in my opinion is Iwo Jima on Breakthrough with balanced teams, the game is downright glorious, using the insane graphics and theatrics of all-out war to recreate one of the most iconic battles in World War II history will make your hair stand up. It's actually that good. Unfortunately, though, it's just a small slice of the whole Battlefield 5 package, and if DICE removes the new playlist, forcing players to circulate back through the mediocre release maps of the game, it could really water down the experience. Hopefully they don't, and the addition of Wake Island next month will just further bolster the new and improved Battlefield experience. It seems like DICE has perhaps learned their lesson, giving fans the big iconic World War II content they wanted, instead of force-feeding their player base lesser-known early war battles. Hopefully everything we see over the next 2 years follows the same trend with more Pacific maps and later war European and Russian theater maps. For people looking for a more authentic World War II experience, the Pacific content comes closer than what we've seen so far, but it's still a Battlefield game, which means rocket bombs landing all over the place, female soldiers in combat, and MG-42s in battles that never had any Germans. The bright side is that there are plenty of more authentic World War II games on the market right now, such as Hell Let Loose. So if you want to get your World War II tactical on, well, you're welcome to do that, just not necessarily in Battlefield 5. With the release of community games though, I'm sure we will start to see some more authentic game settings popping up and maybe even restricting weapons to their appropriate factions or timelines, which could be pretty cool. What about all the other stuff though? Bugs, balance, UI, and meta. Many things have improved, but there's still a lot of work to be done on the core experience. The progression system is still half-baked from the early game content. Newer weapons and vehicles have more interesting progression trees and assignments, but they're still plugged into that terrible system that forces you to quit out of a match to equip new assignments and then rejoin a game. It's been rumored that this system is too deeply ingrained in the game code to ever fix, which is probably why it hasn't seen any changes over the past year, nor has the development team mentioned any plans for an overhaul. This is definitely one of the more annoying aspects of the game right now, and it makes the progression system a chore instead of something that you can just have fun with on the side. Want to get that golden gun skin unlocked? Well, you're probably going to drop several F-bombs on the way there, cursing out the devs who wrote an assignment that they clearly never completed themselves. Some things like being able to respecialize your weapons in game have been added though, so if you are testing out different weapon builds, you can at least change that in game now. The UI is still definitely one of the worst aspects of Battlefield 5, but it has gotten better since launch. Performance for the game has gone up and down. I'm not getting the terrible micro stutters that I used to, although I think some people still are, but the overall performance for the game has been particularly low over the last several patches. Anyone looking for a competitive edge is going to have to set their graphics on low and even downgrade their resolution to 1080p if you've been playing at a higher resolution. This is particularly sad for players who have invested a lot in their PC builds and still can't play the game on high graphics settings without sacrificing a lot of frame rate. Game balance, or more specifically team balance, is still in a bad state. DICE claims that since removing player-controlled team switching, games have been more evenly balanced. But several weeks ago, I played 9 games in a row in which my team lost every match, usually by a landslide. When a team is losing, people quit, and then only new slots are available on a losing team, often resulting in bad teams never gaining any momentum for a comeback. Personally, I miss the days of manual team balance, as I would often switch to the losing side to try and make the game more interesting, and I remember a lot of people would do the same. Sometimes I would see a clan in a server doing a bit of pub stomping, and when asking them to maybe split up for a more balanced experience, I would often see them do so. Perhaps I have a bit of selective memory on this subject, but the simple fact of the matter is that DICE still needs to overhaul their team balancer, maybe even with some mid-round team switching. Game meta has come a long way since launch. DICE has made pistols better, they've balanced out a lot of different classes to make them interesting and useful in most situations. Recons have aggressive semi-auto options now, medics have longer range rifles now, assault classes don't necessarily get all the best guns in the game, and medium machine guns, well, they still kinda suck, but not quite as much as before. Visibility is a lot better than it was before, but it's still not the best, and you're going to get a lot of people camping that you can't see, and before you know it, you'll be dead, but that's just something that you kind of have to live with. In fact, it seems to be much more dependent on map design than engine design. So as long as DICE makes good maps in the future that don't let infantry blend into everything around them, it should get better. Vehicle gameplay, especially piloting, is still not the best, though tanking has seen quite a few improvements with snappier turret responses and slightly better vehicle movement. They're still clunky though, and after you